For more than 3,000 years, a doorway in the Valley of the Kings sat sealed behind rubble, plaster, and a royal stamp that no one had broken. Inside were more than 5,000 objects, packed into a space the size of an ordinary apartment. Gold that had never touched open air in over 3 millennia. Chariots, weapons, furniture, food, and clothing, all arranged for a journey into the afterlife that its owner never got to take on his own terms. A boy who ruled an empire for less than a decade, and who then vanished so completely from the historical record that later kings tried to erase his name from every monument they could reach. By the time archaeologists rediscovered him in 1922, most of the modern world had never even heard of Tutankhamun. Every schoolbook, every list of great pharaohs, skipped straight past him. He was, as far as recorded history was concerned, nobody. But that is the deceptive part. Because the story everyone thinks they know, the gold mask, the curse, the phrase, "wonderful things," is only the surface layer of something far stranger underneath. The real story involves a pharaoh who barely mattered while he was alive, a tomb that may not have even been built for him in the first place, a dagger forged from a metal that did not come from this planet, and a cause of death that modern science, with genetic sequencing, CT imaging, and every diagnostic tool available in the 21st century, still cannot fully agree on. Today we are going inside the single greatest archaeological discovery in human history, and the 10 secrets buried with it that historians, geneticists, and Egyptologists are still working to explain. Stay until the end, because number 1 is not a treasure at all. It is a hidden space that may still exist behind the tomb's painted walls, sealed and untouched, possibly right now, as you are watching this. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is right now where you are. Let's see how many countries this reaches by the end of the day. Number 10. The king who should not have mattered. To understand why Tutankhamun's tomb became one of the greatest discoveries in human history, you first have to understand how small he actually was. Tutankhamun became pharaoh of Egypt at around 9 years old, following the death of Akhenaten, the so-called heretic king who had thrown Egyptian religion into chaos by abolishing the old gods and forcing the entire nation to worship a single deity, the sun disk Aten. Akhenaten had shut down temples that had operated for centuries, stripped priesthoods of their income and power, and relocated the entire capital to a brand new city built in the middle of the desert specifically to honor his new religion. When he died, that city, and the religious order built around it, collapsed almost overnight. Egypt was left in crisis. Trade routes had been neglected. Foreign relationships had frayed. The economy was unstable, and the priesthoods that had once controlled enormous wealth wanted their power back. Into that chaos stepped a child. Historians believe Tutankhamun ruled for roughly 9 to 10 years, guided for most of that time by powerful advisors, most notably a court official named Ai and a military general named Horemheb, before dying at approximately 18 or 19 years old. During his reign, the boy king restored the old gods, reopened the temples his father had closed, and moved the capital back to Thebes. A stone inscription known as the Restoration Stela, still studied by historians today, describes Egypt under Akhenaten as a land where the gods had turned away and temples had fallen into ruin, and credits the young king with setting things right. And then, in the context of Egyptian history, he simply disappeared. He built no major monuments of his own. He fought no legendary wars. Compared to pharaohs like Ramesses II, who ruled for 66 years and covered Egypt in temples bearing his name, Tutankhamun was a footnote, a transitional king remembered mainly for cleaning up a mess he did not create. Later kings, particularly Horemheb, who eventually took the throne himself, are believed to have deliberately removed Tutankhamun's name from official king lists and monuments, likely to erase any public connection to the discredited Akhenaten era. For nearly 3,000 years, most of Egypt, and eventually most of the world, simply forgot he existed. But that erasure had an unintended consequence. Because no one remembered Tutankhamun mattered. No one ever went looking for his tomb to loot it properly, the way almost every other pharaoh's tomb in the Valley of the Kings had been looted within a few generations of burial. Being forgotten was, in the strangest possible way, what kept him safe. And that single accident of history is the reason we are talking about him today. Number 9. The door. No one was supposed to find. By the early 20th century, most Egyptologists believed the Valley of the Kings had given up all its secrets. Every major tomb had been located, mapped, and in most cases, stripped bare by tomb robbers within a few hundred years of the original burial. Wealthy British archaeologist Lord Carnarvon had funded excavation work in the valley for years, working with archaeologist Howard Carter, an Englishman who had originally come to Egypt as a teenager to sketch tomb art and had spent decades learning the region firsthand. By 1922, Carnarvon had spent a fortune on the excavation with almost nothing significant to show for it, and had reportedly told Carter he was prepared to end the funding after one final season. Carter, however, remained convinced an undiscovered tomb was still out there, based on a handful of small artifacts bearing Tutankhamun's name that had turned up in the valley decades earlier. Fragments that suggested a burial existed somewhere nearby, but had never been located. He redirected the dig to an area beneath ancient workers' huts that previous excavators had dismissed as already searched. Then, on the 4th of November 1922, a young water boy working for Carter's team stumbled across a step cut directly into the bedrock. Carter ordered his team to keep digging. 16 steps down, they found a sealed doorway stamped with a royal necropolis seal, the mark used to indicate that whatever lay behind it had been officially closed by ancient authorities, not broken open by robbers. Carter sent a telegram to Carnarvon in England, and then waited nearly 3 weeks for him to make the journey from Britain before opening the tomb any further, a decision that, given the anticipation involved, must have taken enormous restraint. On the 26th of November, 1922, with Carnarvon and his daughter Evelyn present, Carter made a small hole in a second sealed doorway deeper inside the passage and held a candle up to the gap to test for foul air before looking through. Carnarvon reportedly asked if he could see anything. Carter's answer, according to his own later written account, was simply that he could see wonderful things. What he was looking at was a room untouched for over 3,000 years, gold glinting back at him out of the darkness in every direction, animal-shaped funerary couches, dismantled chariots, and boxes stacked floor to ceiling. It was, and remains to this day, the most intact royal tomb ever discovered in Egypt. Almost every other pharaoh's tomb in the valley had been robbed in antiquity, sometimes within a generation of the burial itself. This one, hidden and forgotten because its owner had been erased from memory, had somehow survived completely sealed for well over 3,000 years. Number 8. A room never meant to hold this much. What Carter's team cataloged over the following 10 years remains one of the largest single archaeological hauls in history. More than 5,000 individual objects packed into a tomb with only 4 rooms, an area smaller than most modern apartments. The antechamber alone contained gilded couches shaped like lions, a cow, and a hybrid creature that combined a hippopotamus, crocodile, and lion. Dismantled chariots that had to be assembled inside the tomb because they were too large to fit through the entrance. Whole, weapons, musical instruments, board games meant to help the king pass the time in the afterlife, sealed jars of wine labeled by vintage and vineyard, and boxes of linens and sandals stacked almost to the ceiling. Even a folding camp stool and a child's chair from Tutankhamun's early years were found among the grave goods. Small, oddly personal details in a tomb otherwise built around royal grandeur. It took Carter's team nearly a decade just to document, conserve, and remove everything, one object at a time, photographing and cataloging each piece, using techniques that were, for their era, remarkably careful and methodical. The sheer density of material crammed into such a small tomb told archaeologists something important. This was not a grand, purpose-built royal tomb like the massive multi-chambered complexes built for longer reigning pharaohs such as Seti I or Ramesses II, tombs that stretch back over 100 meters into the rock with dozens of rooms. Tutankhamun's tomb is small, cramped, and by comparison to those, almost hastily organized. Many Egyptologists now believe it may originally have been intended for someone else entirely, perhaps a non-royal official, and was hurriedly repurposed after the young king died unexpectedly, before a proper royal tomb could be finished in time. In other words, one of the richest archaeological discoveries in human history may exist only because Tutankhamun died too suddenly for anyone to build him something bigger. Number 7. The face that became a symbol of ancient Egypt. Inside the burial chamber, resting directly over the mummified king's head and shoulders, was the object that would eventually become one of the most recognized artifacts on Earth, the golden death mask of Tutankhamun. The mask is made of more than 10 kilograms of solid gold, worked in 2 layers and fused together, inlaid with lapis, lazuli, carnelian, turquoise, and colored glass to depict the king's striped royal headdress, his braided ceremonial beard, and a cobra and vulture positioned on his forehead, representing the 2 ancient kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt. Its craftsmanship is so precise that modern goldsmiths still study its construction to understand ancient metalworking techniques that, in some respects, have never been fully replicated using comparable tools. The mask was designed to serve a specific religious function, not simply a decorative one. Egyptians believed a person's spirit needed a recognizable, idealized version of the deceased's face in order to be reunited correctly with the body in the afterlife. Gold, which does not tarnish or corrode, symbolized the eternal, incorruptible flesh of the gods, and by encasing the king's head in it, ancient priests believed they were sealing his identity for eternity. For decades after its discovery, the mask sat on display in Cairo's Egyptian Museum, admired by millions of visitors, but largely unexamined at a microscopic level. Then, in August 2015, conservators accidentally broke off the mask's braided beard while cleaning its display case. In their attempt to fix the damage quickly, the repair team used a fast-drying epoxy adhesive rather than reversible conservation materials, leaving visible glue residue and drawing international criticism once the mistake was discovered. Egyptian authorities later had the beard properly reattached by a specialist German-Egyptian conservation team, a process that took several months. But the accident had an unexpected upside. While examining the mask more closely than anyone had in nearly a century, researchers found evidence suggesting the mask itself may have been altered after its original creation. The facial features and certain design elements point to the possibility that it was originally made for a different, earlier royal owner, before being modified and adapted for Tutankhamun's burial. Even the most famous object in Egyptian archaeology, it turns out, might not have started life as his. Number 6. A body wrapped in 3 coffins of escalating value. To reach Tutankhamun's actual remains, Carter's team had to work through a nested sequence of containers unlike anything found before or since, anywhere in the ancient world. 4 gilded wooden shrines, one fitted inside the other, filled almost the entire burial chamber, leaving only centimeters of clearance between the outermost shrine's walls and the room around it. Carter's team had to partially dismantle the outer shrine piece by piece, right there inside the tomb, simply to create enough working space to continue. Inside the innermost shrine sat a massive stone sarcophagus carved from a single block of quartzite, its lid, oddly, made from a different type of stone entirely, granite that had been painted to match, suggesting the original lid may have cracked or been replaced during construction. Inside that sarcophagus were 3 coffins, nested like a set of matryoshka dolls, each one shaped like the king in the traditional pose of the god Osiris, arms crossed over the chest, holding the ceremonial crook and flail of Egyptian kingship. The outer two coffins were made of wood, covered in gold leaf, and inlaid with colored glass and semi-precious stone. But the innermost coffin, the one holding the mummy directly against its surface, was made of more than 110 kilograms of solid gold. Not gold leaf, not a wooden core, covered in gilding. Solid cast gold, roughly the weight of a fully grown adult, making it one of the largest single gold artifacts ever recovered from the ancient world. The value of the materials alone, at current gold prices, would run into the millions of dollars. But Egyptologists are careful to point out that the object's real value has nothing to do with the metal itself. It represents an almost unimaginable investment of skilled labor, rare materials, and religious devotion, poured into the burial of a king who ruled for less than a decade, and who, by most historical measures available to the people who buried him, was a minor figure in his own lifetime. Whoever organized this burial spared no expense, regardless of how little the world would go on to remember him. Number 5. The curse that was never real, but wouldn't die. No discussion of Tutankhamun's tomb is complete without addressing the curse, because it became, and in many ways remains, the most widely believed part of the entire story. More famous to most people than any single object found inside. Roughly 2 months after the tomb was opened, Lord Carnarvon died in a Cairo hotel room from an infected mosquito bite on his cheek that developed into blood poisoning, worsened by pneumonia, in a body already weakened by years of poor health following a serious car accident decades earlier. The timing, so soon after the tomb's opening, was dramatic enough that newspapers around the world seized on the idea that the tomb had been protected by an ancient curse, and that anyone who disturbed the pharaoh's rest would suffer the consequences. Popular legend even claimed that at the exact moment of Carnarvon's death, the lights across Cairo flickered out, and that his dog back in England howled and died at that same instant, stories that were widely repeated but were never independently documented at the time. The press coverage snowballed from there. Every subsequent death connected, however loosely, to anyone who had ever visited the excavation site was reported as further proof of the curse. A radiologist who had x-rayed the mummy years earlier, an American financier who had toured the tomb, even a nurse who had cared for Carnarvon in his final days, each death added another headline to the growing legend. Some accounts claimed a hidden inscription near the tomb's entrance warned that death would come on swift wings to anyone who disturbed the pharaoh's rest, a phrase that circulated widely in the press. Though no verified inscription matching that exact wording has ever been confirmed to exist anywhere inside the actual tomb. Statisticians eventually studied the real mortality data behind the legend. A 2002 analysis published in the British Medical Journal examined the lifespans of everyone documented as present when the tomb and sarcophagus were physically opened, and found no statistically significant difference in life expectancy compared to other people of similar age and background living in that era. Howard Carter himself, the man who spent more time in direct contact with the tomb's interior than anyone else on Earth, lived nearly 17 more years after the discovery, before dying of natural causes at the age of 64. The curse was never real, but it did something the tomb's actual contents never could have done on their own. It turned a dry archaeological find into a global media sensation, and turned a 9-year-old king who ruled for less than a decade into one of the most recognized names in ancient history. Number 4. What modern science found inside the body itself. For decades, Tutankhamun's mummy was studied only through visual inspection, leaving the actual cause of his death almost entirely a matter of speculation. That changed with the arrival of CT scanning and DNA analysis in the 2000s. A 2010 genetic study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, led by Egyptian researchers including Zahi Hawass, extracted DNA from Tutankhamun's mummy and several related royal remains. The results were striking. Tutankhamun showed evidence of severe physical impairments, including a club foot, bone necrosis in one foot that likely required the use of a cane, for which more than 130 walking sticks were actually found buried with him, and signs of malaria in his tissue, detected through the presence of parasite genetic material. The same study also confirmed something Egyptologists had suspected for years, but never proven. Tutankhamun's parents were siblings. Royal Egyptian families frequently practiced close intermarriage to preserve bloodlines, and the genetic consequences appear to have been significant, potentially contributing to his physical ailments and shortened lifespan. As for his actual cause of death, the evidence remains genuinely inconclusive. CT scans in 2005 revealed a broken leg, possibly suffered shortly before death, that could have led to a fatal infection. Combined with the malaria infection, some researchers believe a combination of a weakened immune system, genetic disorders, and infection ultimately killed him. Others have proposed a chariot accident. A few have suggested foul play was never fully ruled out. More than a century after his tomb was found, and with the full power of modern genetic science applied to his remains, the exact cause of Tutankhamun's death is still officially unresolved. Number 3. A blade older than Earth's own Iron Age. If you're finding this fascinating, this is a good moment to hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next item on this list connects an ancient Egyptian tomb directly to outer space. Among the objects found on Tutankhamun's mummified body was an iron dagger with a finely decorated gold handle, remarkable because ancient Egypt, at the time of Tutankhamun's death, around 1323 BCE, had not yet developed the ability to smelt iron. Iron tools of that era across the entire region were exceptionally rare and valuable. In 2016, a team of Italian and Egyptian researchers used X-ray fluorescence spectrometry to analyze the blade's composition without damaging it. Their findings, published in the journal Meteoritics and Planetary Science, showed the blade's iron contained a specific ratio of nickel and cobalt that closely matched known meteorites, rather than iron smelted from terrestrial ore. In other words, the blade resting on the body of the boy king had almost certainly been forged from a meteorite, iron that fell to Earth from space. Ancient Egyptian texts referred to iron using a term that translates roughly to iron of the sky, suggesting they may have understood, on some level, that this material had come from somewhere beyond the ground they walked on. The dagger is a small object, but it represents a piece of technology so advanced for its time, and so tied to a substance the Egyptians themselves seemed to recognize as extraordinary, that it remains one of the most quietly astonishing objects in the entire tomb. Number 2. A tomb built for someone else. Here is where the mystery deepens rather than resolves. For years, Egyptologists have puzzled over why Tutankhamun's tomb for a full pharaoh of Egypt is so small compared to those of his predecessors and successors. Most royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings contain long corridors and multiple large chambers. Tutankhamun's tomb has essentially 4 rooms, cramped and irregular in layout. In 2015, British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves proposed a theory that reignited global interest in the tomb. After closely examining high-resolution scans of the burial chamber's painted walls, Reeves argued he could detect the faint outlines of 2 previously unknown sealed doorways behind the plaster, suggesting the tomb might extend further than anyone realized. His theory proposed that Tutankhamun's tomb was originally built as, or intended to become, part of a larger tomb for Queen Nefertiti, and that Tutankhamun's burial was hastily inserted into just the outer chambers of a much bigger structure. Ground-penetrating radar scans conducted by the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities between 2015 and 2018 produced conflicting results. An initial scan in 2016 appeared to support the existence of hidden chambers, A follow-up scan in 2018, using different equipment and methodology, found no clear evidence of any voids behind the walls. As of today, the debate remains unresolved. No Egyptian authority has authorized physically breaking through the painted walls of Tutankhamun's burial chamber to find out for certain. And doing so would risk permanently damaging artwork that has survived over 3,000 years. Somewhere behind that wall, there may be nothing at all. Or there may be an entirely separate royal burial, sealed and undisturbed, that the world has still never seen. Number 1. The Mother Egypt still cannot name. Before we reveal the final secret, look at the subscribe button. If it's not lit up yet, go ahead and fix that. And tell us in the comments which of these 10 secrets surprised you the most. We read every single one. Number 1 brings us back to genetics, and to a question that DNA alone has not been able to fully answer. Who was Tutankhamun's mother? The 2010 genetic study identified her only through her mummy's remains, a woman found in a side chamber of a nearby tomb known as KV-35, referred to by researchers simply as the younger lady, since her identity has never been formally confirmed. DNA comparison confirmed she was both a full sibling of Akhenaten and Tutankhamun's biological mother, meaning Tutankhamun's parents were brother and sister. But which historical queen the younger lady actually is remains genuinely contested. Some Egyptologists argue she must be Akhenaten's sister, a minor and largely undocumented royal wife. Others believe there simply isn't enough evidence in the historical record to assign her identity with confidence at all. Her body was found without royal wrappings, without grave goods befitting a queen, seemingly stripped of the identifying materials that would let modern researchers know exactly who she had been. We have this woman's DNA. We know her precise genetic relationship to one of history's most famous pharaohs, and we still do not know her name. It is, in many ways, the perfect final secret for this tomb. A discovery that gave the world more information about ancient Egypt than perhaps any other single find in history. And that still, after DNA sequencing, CT scans, meteorite analysis, and a century of study, leaves us facing genuine, unresolved questions. Tutankhamun ruled for less than a decade. He built no great monuments. Later kings tried to erase him from the record entirely. And by almost every measure available to the people who buried him, he should have been forgotten. Instead, because his tomb was too small and too hidden for ancient robbers to bother finding, he became the single most studied pharaoh in Egyptian history. Every object pulled from those 4 cramped rooms, the gold mask, the meteorite dagger, the nested coffins, the walking sticks built for a boy with a damaged foot, tells us more about how ancient Egyptians lived, believed, and buried their dead than almost any other discovery before or since. But for every question his tomb answered, it left another one standing. What lies behind that painted wall, if anything at all? What truly killed him? Whose face, the golden mask, was first made to represent? The tomb of Tutankhamun did not just uncover the past. It reminded the world how much of it is still missing. Which of these 10 secrets stayed with you the most? Tell us in the comments. And if you made it this far, you clearly have great taste in history. Hit subscribe, join us for the next one, and we'll see you there.